On this episode, we discuss some misconceptions and half-truths surrounding Thailand's sex industry.
So, if you want to learn about Thailand's relationship with the world's oldest profession, you'll love this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 to find a cure for my thinning hair, which turned out to be just shaving my head and having a beer on a beach.
That is a cure. I agree.
Yeah, I soon forgot all about my thinning hair.
And I am Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 21 years ago. Fell in love with wandering the backstories of Bangkok, not knowing if I was going to run into a pile of old engine parts or the best noodle shop in the world. So I never left.
You never know. It's always a surprise.
There you go. We want to give a big thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a whole bunch of cool stuff, including our ad-free regular show a day early, emails with behind-the-scenes photos of our interviews, access to our Discord server to chat with me, Greg, and other listeners around the world, and various other goodies. But best of all, patrons like Ben also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and Bangkok topics. We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and we chatted about Greg's visit to a very deserted Pat Pong, while I tell the story of two young female Thai friends of mine who visited Nana Plaza for the first time and their takeaways from the evening, plus another segment of Weed Watch.
Weed Watch!
And Thai news of the weird. To learn how to become a patron, click the support button at the top of our website.
Right, and as always, if you have something to say or a show idea or a joke or just want to say hi, head to bangkokpodcast.com and click the little microphone button on the bottom right to leave us a voicemail that we will play on the show.
All right, I want to do a quick shout out to Liam from Belgium, who I met last night. He's new to Thailand, only in Thailand a day or two. Welcome to Thailand, Liam. Hope you had a good time, and good luck to you on your adventures. Also, a quick shout out to Anna from Lampang. Welcome to Bangkok, Anna. And I just want to point out that the Bangkok Podcast is not just for foreigners new to Thailand. It's also for Thai people who might be new to Bangkok. That's why we're called the Bangkok Podcast.
It's like a whole new market opening up for us.
Heck yeah. Thai tourists. We can handle it. I think we can handle it.
I think we can. Maybe Anna can start the Lampang Podcast.
There you go. Maybe that'll work.
All right, well, this episode was inspired by a video that we saw online recently, which talked about the history of Thailand's sex industry, which opened with the influx of GIs after the Vietnam War and went from there. Now, the problem with this, of course, is that the video completely ignores the fact that the sex industry in Thailand was chugging along quite nicely long before anyone ever thought of Pattaya as a destination for some R&R. Now, this view is something that's often seen online where people talk about how foreigners drive the entire industry along, but don't mention that the red neon glow coming from spots that draw tourists are only a tiny fraction of the industry. So we thought that we would discuss. Ed, what's your take on this? I know you're much more studied on this than I am. You've read a lot more about it and sort of talked about it a lot more than I have. I think I'm just going to follow your lead on this and hear what you have to say.
Okay, well, I guess it depends on what you mean by studied. Number one, this is not my actual field of study, although I teach at a university. I've never done any research on the history of prostitution in Thailand or the history of red light districts. But my problem with the video is that, I've got several problems with it, and we're going to include a link to the video for our listeners. My problem with it is that I think it perpetuates this myth that a lot of the red light districts in Thailand or even prostitution in general is somehow due to foreign influence, which I think is obviously not true. So that's my, I think it's worth discussing. Now, I want to be clear from the beginning that, the video is only 10 minutes long. I think there's a lot of good stuff in the video, a lot of factually accurate information about the Thai government's efforts to minimize sex trafficking. The video also talks about the rise of condom use in Thailand, which we've talked about before when we interviewed Kun Michai, who was a prominent Thai politician in the 80s and 90s who promoted condom use. So there's plenty of good stuff in the video. The problem is that there is this myth that is common among kind of prominent Thai people, or in a way, it's almost like the official Thai position is that, hey, okay, we realize there's prostitution in Thailand, but this is mainly due to foreigners. This myth I've got a big problem with.
Right. Why do you have a big problem with it? Because, I mean, I think most of our listeners are foreigners, and I think most of the people who do visit Thailand have been or should go to or think they should go to one of these red light districts, whether it's Patpong or Nana or Cowboy. Those are the top three ones, but there are a few other ones. And then, of course, Pattaya. But, it's almost considered like a rite of passage. You got to go. That leads into the fact that one of Thailand's main industries is the tourism industry. And I think some people might think like, it follows naturally then that the tourism industry must be one of the main drivers of the sex trade in Thailand.
Okay, I mean, I think that there is truth to that, but I would just say my first reaction to that in terms of the problem with that is then in that particular case, you're only talking about the demand side. So you're saying, hey, there are tourists who are interested in the sex trade, but you're not, Thai people are not taking responsibility for the fact that they're providing the supply. So you can't blame foreigners for the fact that Thai people are providing the supply, and that's not just the Thai women or men who are working in the sex industry, who you might be able to say, well, maybe they're economically desperate. Okay, so maybe there's an argument there. But what about the Thai families that own the buildings and the land where Patpong is located, or Nana is located, or in Pattaya? These are wealthy Thai people that own the property that the so-called sex industry is located on. And so they could, if they wanted to, they are the lessors, they are the owners of the property. They could just say, I won't allow a go-go bar to exist on the property. So so even if you're right about that foreigners provide the demand, the bottom line is Thai people are still providing the supply, and not just the workers themselves, but the owners. That would be problem number one. And to be honest, my real problem with this video is that 95% of it is fine.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Because I think with some judicious editing, and if they added a couple sentences, it would be fine. But it actually at the beginning of the video, to be honest, I'm going to be a little bit specific here. If you start around the 35-second mark, the commentator actually says, how did it all start? And that's it right there. That's the problem. This is the Thai myth. Where did prostitution in Thailand come from? How did it all start? I have a problem with that. Like, that should have been edited out or fixed, because then she goes into an explanation of American GIs on R&R in Vietnam. And this is the classic story. Why is prostitution so popular in Thailand? Oh, it's due to American GIs. And again, there's a grain of truth to it, because there were American GIs here. And if you just do a little bit of research, you can learn, okay, so that could explain some specific locations. Maybe that explains Cowboy, or maybe it explains maybe it explains Patpong, or who knows, maybe it explains Pattaya. But with just a little bit of basic research, all you have to do is Google it. You don't need a PhD. That prostitution is the oldest profession in the world. Like, it's existed everywhere, including Thailand and old Siam. It's been around forever, everywhere, and it's not caused by foreigners. It's not. It's just the wrong way to approach the problem. And I think they could have fixed it with just a little bit of judicious editing. I mean, you are an editor. You don't agree?
No, I agree. I mean, we should also say too, listeners are probably saying, what video? But this is a video that was put out by Thaiger, which is a very well-known news website in Thailand. And they do some great stuff. They have some really cool videos.
Yeah, agreed.
They have a lot more, certainly a hell of a lot more followers on Facebook and stuff than we do. So they put out some really good content. And like you said, the video is otherwise really good. But, it's these very, very small tweaks of language that can sometimes be misconstrued or taken the wrong way, which when you're talking about a topic as sensitive as this, should have like an extra level of scrutiny to them to make sure that you're removing all ambiguity.
Right. I mean, I know it's basically your job. It's like to edit and fix language, but language matters. And, this whole topic, I was going back and forth about whether this would be worth doing because it's such a minefield. So here we are, we're two foreigners, like even though we live in Thailand for like a long time. And here's a video. And actually the commentator is a Thai woman with, of course, excellent English. And here we are. In a way, we're going to, no matter what we say, we're going to come across as defensive. We're going to come across as saying like, hey, like we didn't create the problem. As soon as you bring this issue up, it's like you sound guilty. You're like, yeah, of course we created the demand, but it's been around forever. But the bottom line is this is actually an important issue because I think it has to do with the way Thailand sees itself. And this is one of my long-standing criticisms, and I've talked about it on several shows, is that there's kind of an official Thai government, but also it's not just the Thai government, it's kind of like the Thai elite. They have an official position. We are a conservative Buddhist country. That's just the official position. And anything that is contrary to that is blamed on foreigners. I have a big problem with this as a 20-year resident. It's not just the obvious common sense fact that prostitution has existed in every country in the world since the beginning of time. So that's just one obvious common sense thing. But another thing that, again, this just takes the tiniest bit of research, right, is that the majority of prostitution in Thailand is geared towards Thai men or Thai customers. So this is not really in dispute, but all you have to do is do like a couple simple Google searches, and there's really no debate that anywhere from 70 to 95% of all prostitution in Thailand is geared towards Thai men. It's just an obvious fact. Why not throw that sentence in? Like, this is my problem with the video. That's my point, is that it could be easily fixed.
Well, I think that one thing that can't be ignored is that, like, again, when my grammar Nazi thing comes out and it says, I mean, the video in question here is called A Short History of Prostitution in Thailand. And it begins at the Vietnam War. And obviously it existed a long time before that. So, a couple of tweaks with the verbiage there could have helped. But let me read a little short paragraphs from an article on the Culture Trip, which has some pretty good stuff on different things around the world. But this says, tragic though it may be, the exploitation of women in forced sexual servitude has been around for a very long time. During the Ayutthaya period of Thailand's history, from 1351 to 1767, women were passed around amongst men as concubines. And that links to a study on the Thailand Journal of Law and Policy. And then it says they were spoils of war given to men as rewards for their efforts on the battlefield. They were slaves and so had to follow the bidding of their masters or face punishment. It remained this way for hundreds of years until the 20th century, when King Rama V sought a more Western approach to the policy and abolished slavery. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of the suffering. And then the final paragraph says, the abolition of slavery brought about freedom from slavery, yet freedom without land, property, or money to support the family often left the uneducated slaves little choice but to turn towards prostitution. Brothels began to grow and spread among the length and breadth of the nation. It was here where they competed both with Chinese migrants who came on the back of Thailand's rice exporting boom of the mid-19th century, and often with younger children who were sought after by some. So yeah, there's definitely like hundreds and hundreds of years of this.
Yeah, it's a very
tied closely with the economic development of Ayutthaya and Siam and Thailand. So it goes back a long, long way.
Yeah, and this whole topic is tricky because as soon as you start talking this way, it sounds like you're making an argument that Thai history or Thai culture has some specific proclivity towards prostitution, but that is not the point. No. My point is that prostitution is just common in every country throughout history. I mean, I remember just reading about ancient Greece and, this ancient lawgiver in ancient Greece, Solon, who's he's considered part of the founders of democracy. In one of his rants, he was complaining about the cost of prostitutes and how the government has to regulate. And he was basically almost saying, as a human right, like sex should be cheap. And this is this is ancient Greece, like one of the foundations.
2,500 years ago.
Yeah, like, but this is Western civilization. So what I'm trying to say is that prostitution is deeply embedded in Western civilization, deeply.
Oh yeah, of course,
totally, totally deeply embedded.
Yeah.
But so when we talk about Thai history, it's like I'm not trying to say that Thailand is special. I'm trying to say it's not special. It's just that this is the oldest profession in the world, and it's certainly the unique history applies to every country. Like as so I did some quick research on my own, and it went through the research I did went through a bunch of interesting angles. Like they were talking about that in traditional Buddhism, women were actually like lower status, which prevented them from working jobs where they could earn money.
Oh, okay.
So they were left to like lower jobs or jobs that were considered spiritually lower, right? So one of the theories, not really in modern Buddhism, but in traditional Buddhism, it's like women were kind of shut out. So they were left to like quote unquote lower jobs to earn money.
I see.
And this is part of the reason that Thailand has this class system. Like when I look at the red light districts here, to me, I see social class, where the women who tend to work in these places, they come from the poorer parts of Thailand. And this is in a way why it's tolerated. This is why it's perpetuated. This is why the cops accept the bribes and why the government turns a blind eye, is that it's not upper class Thai women. So it's like this is acceptable, even if it's not correct. It's acceptable behavior from lower class Thais. So that I think there's a class system. Then, of course, there's this history of slavery, again, which existed everywhere in the world. But then when slavery was ended, that there was still this idea that there was this lower class of people that were meant to serve the upper class, even if they weren't actually slaves anymore. Then we have a history of polygamy, and reading this afternoon, it was fascinating, like reading about the history of polygamy in Thailand. And they were basically saying that it was normal for Thai men, or I guess I should say upper class Thai men, to have 3 wives. And
oh, really? 3?
Yeah,
huh?
yeah. So the first wife, the major wife, the proper wife, was chosen by his parents. And the first wife was purely for social status. It's like almost like a negotiation. It's almost political. You're marrying another woman from a prominent family, and it's just to secure your status.
Oh, okay, all right.
Okay, so that's your first wife.
Your Mia.
Right, and your second wife was to bear children. So a man would have some choice in the matter, but the idea was this is the woman who, like, in a way, I think of her as almost like a nursemaid, or she's like, her job was like to bear the children and take care of them. Oh. The first wife was like she's not going to get involved in that. Like that's, she's above the taking care of kids thing, right?
Right. Lucky.
But so the second wife is busy, basically being a mom. And then the third wife was the slave wife. That was the translation of the document that I read. And she was for enjoyment. She was for fun. And they were like lower status. So this is part of the system of polygamy, is that the different wives had different roles.
Oh, okay, interesting. Is there a similar thing, a similar hierarchy in polygamy in Western countries, like in the with the Mormons and stuff?
I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, I think polygamy has less of a history in the West. I was shocked. I mean, this is way back in the day when I first started teaching, and I actually taught this, honestly, 15 years ago, but I taught a class in Western civilization. So I have to begin at the beginning, and I was reading about the Code of Hammurabi, which is the oldest.
Yeah, I've seen that.
I think it's complete. I think it's considered the oldest complete system of laws. But monogamy is part of the Code of Hammurabi.
I've seen the Code of Hammurabi. I stood in front of it in the Louvre in Paris. It's amazing.
Yeah, but I mean, I think monogamy is part of it. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of exceptions. I'm not saying that Western culture never had polygamy or never tolerated mistresses. That's ridiculous. But my simple point is that, like this video, if the video was about something about like, where did Pat Pong come from, or how did Pattaya get so popular, something like that. And I do clearly the recent history, GIs on R&R had something to do with it. But even if you accept that, you're just ignoring the fact that so many Thai men frequent prostitutes. It's like, this is a thing. And it's like, and again, just in my brief research that I read, and like, we should try to get an expert, but basically they were saying that, and this is recent research, that the majority of Thai men, their first sexual experience is with a bar girl.
Well, like you said, we also can't deny the fact that like the contemporary modern prostitution industry really got going, really got a boost in the wake of World War II and the Vietnam War, and that whole era of things. And I read a study recently when I was doing some research for this that said that, like there was a tenfold increase in I forget how they put it, but like places to go to do prostitution, within the vicinity of places where Westerners would military bases and Western centric towns and things like that.
All of that is true. All of that is true, and it's worthy of mention. But in order not to confuse people, you also should mention that even with that increase, the number of Thai men visiting prostitutes is still much higher. So you can say, you can say all you want that, there's these foreigners that created Pati or whatever, but then you have to talk about the Thai zones, like the Thai red light districts. And like I said, if you're just more specific, if you just say, hey, cowboy would not be what it is today if it wasn't for Vietnam vets or like Vietnam soldiers on R&R, that's fine. Like if that's your claim, right. But to say in the video, they say, where did it all start? That is extremely bad history, factually incorrect, and it's just sloppy, and it's worthy of criticism. Like I said, I like a lot of stuff Thaiger does, but this video in particular, whoever wrote it or did the research, it's bad. It's bad history. It's bad writing. It perpetuates it perpetuates a horrible myth.
I think it pays, like I said, when you're dealing with topics as sensitive and as central to the cultural footprint of a place like Thailand, then it pays to be extra specific and extra accurate with the information, right down to the words that you use, because they can be taken the wrong way, and these things can snowball.
Yeah, for sure. And I try to explain this to my students. It's let's suppose you are a genuine conservative Thai Buddhist, and you really think prostitution is wrong and you want to minimize it or get rid of it. The only way to do that is to be honest about what it is. Like, you're not, if you're a genuine, heartfelt, I think this is wrong, we got to get rid of it. If you think it's caused by foreigners, you're never going to be able to get rid of it. You can't get anything done if you don't recognize the facts or the truth. So my point in my criticism of the video is that it just hurts everybody. Like it's a bad video for foreigners because it blames us for something we're not responsible for, but it's actually also a bad video for conservative Thais because it feeds them like something that's not true and therefore prevents them from fixing a problem that apparently they think is wrong.
Yeah. It's an ongoing issue. It's a sensitive issue, and we should have someone on here to talk about this in more detail. Preferably a Thai woman would be nice. And speaking of this, I'm looking at an article from 2020. The headline says Chiang Mai Group revives push to decriminalize prostitution in Thailand. And it says the Chiang Mai Group hopes to gather 10,000 signatures on a petition to pressure the government into decriminalizing prostitution. The Empower Foundation, which supports sex workers, is urging authorities to remove all penalties for selling sex, saying the 1960 law that made prostitution illegal invites corruption and exploitation. So there's definitely a modern movement to liberalize and
sure.
sort of what's the term? Not renovate, but update the current
sure.
industry and the laws around it. So it's ongoing, but it's certainly been around for a long time, and it'll probably be around forever. So let's keep on top of how it develops.
It's much easier and super lazy just to blame foreigners. That's the easy. That's the easy way out. So that's what's wrong with the video. Is it's just the easy way out.
All right, I'm down with that. But we'll probably try to explore this topic in greater detail with an expert in a future show.
Sure.
All right, let's get into some love, loathe, or live with, where one of us picks a particular aspect of living in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or have come to accept as just something that we have to learn to live with no matter how we feel about it. Last time, Ed asked me what I thought about fish balls floating in soup. So this week, it is my turn. Now, Ed, you don't have... Your hands aren't too soft. You're used to some physical labor here and there, and I imagine you clean your house by yourself from time to time.
Occasionally. I do like to work with my hands, building stuff. But you're right, yeah. Calluses, I do not have.
Well, what's your thoughts on these things? When you're sweeping the house, do you prefer to use one of those old-fashioned kunyai brooms that you can see being sold on those bicycle carts that guys push around that are made with like it looks like wheat? Or
Right,
do you prefer like a modern broom with like nylon bristles made from 3M?
I actually like this question. You may not believe it, like listeners. Greg doesn't tell me like the love loathe to live with is live. I have no idea what Greg's going to say. But this week, probably what would have been 3 days ago, I was in Home Pro and I bought a new broom. And I've got a big problem with like the whole broom selection in Thailand. It's like you even
Oh, really?
you even understated it, because
I opened a wound.
You understated it because there's old school like groups of straw, basically, is the kind of the traditional broom. And the weird thing is you can go to like a modern, apparently sophisticated place like Home Pro, and they still sell that. It might look a little bit better or maybe a little more professional, but it's still just a bunch of straw.
Yeah,
Right.
like grass or reeds or something like that. I'm not sure what it is.
And then they also have narrow, almost like scrub. To me, I would consider it almost like a scrub brush on a stick. So it's a little bit more modern. It's plastic, but
Right.
It's kind of narrow. It would almost be like if you were like rigorously cleaning the floor, like if you were like scrubbing the floor. They have that, but they don't.
Right.
Honestly, they don't really have what I would consider just like a broom. Like I don't even know. It's so funny. Like, I almost have to use pictures to explain it. But I just whatever. Back home, we just have like wide, long brooms with relatively soft bristles, and you can just kind of put. Like, I guess you'd call it a push broom. I don't know, but so you could kind of clean a large area fairly quickly.
Right.
And those don't exist. Anyone out there, if you found it, like a broad, wide, I would call it a push broom. But
Right, where it goes like shh, 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 like
Yeah.
as you walk forward kind of thing.
but they're they're fairly wide. I mean, I still think in American terms. So they might be like 2 feet wide or something like that.
Right.
And the best I can get at Home Pro is something that's honestly, it's like a foot wide or less. It's like 10 inches wide. It's like a scrub brush on a stick, Or again, you have these quote unquote brooms that are, it's like something a witch would ride on or something. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. So
Well,
I'm going to go just loathe. Just when it comes to like broom selection in Thailand, I'm a loathe.
Well, it's funny. I used to be like that too, but now, like, basically, my mother-in-law lives with us most of the time. So, the cleaning utensils, eventually mine got pushed out or old or broken, and they were replaced with hers. And she buys all these old traditional ones. And I gotta say, these old like grass-style brooms, I'm a fan.
What?
They don't last forever.
Okay, they're better than nothing. Okay, I admit they are better than nothing, but they're just not as good as a proper like push broom. The bottom line is it's a bunch of straw like tied together. It is better than nothing. Yeah. So whatever, I'll give it that credit. It's better than nothing. But why not just like a modern proper broom?
Yeah, I had one of those once a while too. I had them a while back, and I was using it, and I kept using it because it was mine, and I bought it, and it wasn't cheap. And then after a while, I just admitted to myself, I'm like, you know what? I'd rather use the other broom. I think it's just better for cleaning my place.
Better?
It's better.
You mean like bags of straw tied together? It's better? Like, how is it better?
That was my theory, and my theory was proven right during experimentation.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, my experience is totally different. Again,
Well-
like I've used the straw brooms many times. It's like it's better than nothing. Like it's just better than nothing. But I don't see how it's better than like a proper. I don't even know what to call it because it's like I haven't found it here. Like I think of it as a push broom. I mean, it's honestly almost. It's like we need like a series of pictures explaining what I'm talking about. But it's like the best I could find. The best I could find is this very narrow. It's like a scrub brush on a stick. That's like the closest I could find to what I would consider a real broom.
All right. Well, our broom sensibilities are opposite. I'm a fan of those old fashioned.
Dude, I'll go to war over this, man. I'll die on this hill.
Except when it comes to cleaning water off the sidewalk, and they have that witch's broom thing. That doesn't make any sense to me. But that was already a.
All right. Well, so we'll have to continue this later. Maybe we can add this to our list of like Greg and Ed classic debates, like Patio, worth it or not.
That'll be a good show.
How would you grade Thai brooms? A, B, C, D. I'm not a fan of Thai brooms. I'm just gonna say I'm gonna go D.
Five things about Thailand we disagree on.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Future show. Well, we got two things: Pattaya and brooms. Luckily, we agree on durian ice cream. We got that. We totally agree on that.
Yeah, we're done with that.
Yeah, maybe Thai taxis. You and I seem to disagree on them. I think I'm a little bit more satisfied with them than you are.
All right, we got the beginnings of a new show.
Yeah. Okay. We'll see if we can get 5. If we get 5, we'll do a show.
All right.
So, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we'd like to say thank you to Ben and McMahon for lending us his support at the show shadow level. And Greg, what did you find out about Ben?
Well, as it turns out, Ed, Ben has a connection to the show that I'm not sure you're familiar with, but he knows Matt Fisher, who was a former guest on the show way back in season 3 about running his restaurant called Fatty's.
Damn. Fatty's used to be my home away from home. I used to live very close by. I'm a huge fan of Matt, huge fan of Fatty's. I strongly recommend it to anyone to check it out.
Yeah, well, it turns out him and Ben are old friends, and Ben is still back in Wisconsin, but he's had a hell of a journey, man. And check this out. Ben said, after high school, I spent some time moving from the Twin Cities to Chicago, to Santa Fe, to, and listen to this, Tugaski, Saskatchewan.
Damn.
Have you ever heard of that place?
No. I have no idea what you're talking about. It just sounds crazy. It sounds badass.
Yeah, neither did I. And I looked it up too. Well, first of all, from Tugaski, he moved to Thailand and then he went back to Wisconsin. But he said, I was in Tugaski for a winter learning to build acoustic guitars.
Oh, cool.
And Tugaski, check this out. I looked it up on Wikipedia. It was established as a town in 1909. Its population peaked in 1991 at 157 people. Its population now is 75.
I see. That's hyper specific, dude.
Yeah, but I was in Tugaski for a winter learning to build acoustic guitars.
Love it. I love it.
He said it was so cold, so dark, and so lonely. There were only 2 other students at the time, and I'm sure you know how desolate rural Saskatchewan is. Damn. The only obvious next move was Thailand.
Damn. Okay, that's a pretty big contrast. That's a pretty big step.
Yeah, man. And I mean, you know, the joke about Saskatchewan, which is right next to the province that I'm from in Canada, the joke about Saskatchewan is that you could watch, it's so flat, you can watch your dog run away for 2 days, 3 days if you stand on a brick.
Oh, I love it. That's great. I appreciate that. That's great.
Yeah. But I looked it up on Google Street View, Tugaski, Saskatchewan. Dude, it looks like a town out of Red Dead Redemption 2, like an Old West town, like dirt roads and stuff.
That's great. That's great.
But yeah, so Ben says I spent 3 months bopping around Thailand and of course fell in love. I got married to my high school sweetheart when I returned home. The 2 of us have just opened a tiny restaurant in Door County, Wisconsin called the Lost Tuk Tuk. And we're hoping to make it back overseas this winter.
Nice, man. That's a great story. Thank you, Ben, very much. I appreciate it a lot. The podcast appreciates your support.
Totally. But I just think Ben's got to be real careful, man. I mean, you're making Thai-based dishes and Thai food in Wisconsin. Like if a hardcore foodie Thai person rolls through your joint, you got to be on the ball, man. Because I've been to Thai restaurants in Canada that ain't so hot with my wife, and it's not a pleasant evening.
Yeah, man, it's pretty tough to satisfy the locals as well as like any visiting Thais.
Yeah, that's right, man. You got to be on the ball. But hey, man, I guess, Ben, I mean, if you serve a plate of tom kha or something, or a dish of tom kha, and some Thai person gets angry that it's not up to snuff, then you can just whip out your handmade guitar and say, hey, I built this in Tugaski, Saskatchewan in the middle of winter when it was minus 400 degrees. And play
That's right.
That'll soothe the nerves.
That's great.
But thanks, Ben. We appreciate it, man. And let us know when you're back in town. And we'll get some inspiration for a new menu at your restaurant called Lost Tuk Tuk.
Absolutely, for sure. All right. A final thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping support the show. Find out more by clicking support on our website and connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
Totally. You can also listen to each episode on YouTube. You can send us a voicemail through our website that we'll feature on the show, or even reach out to me directly on Twitter where I am BKGayGreg. So thanks for listening, everyone. Take it easy, and we'll see you back here next week.
For sure. Actually, we also kind of
Jerry ice cream is not so bad.
I was going to say we also kind of agree on Thai taxis. Oh, no, hold on a second. We actually disagree. You're more. Wait, I can't even remember. I think you're more critical of Thai taxis than I am, right? I was always the defense. I always say like Thai taxis. I would give them a grade of B. Like I definitely understand the criticisms, but most of the time they're fine. But then you are harder because you're like you own your own car, and so I think you're harsher on Thai taxi drivers, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So I'll throw that out there.